Imagine a winter so absolute, like so relentlessly dead, that the forest around you stops feeling like an ecosystem.
Oh, yeah.
It actually starts feeling like an open grave.
That is a brutally bleak image.
Right, but imagine you are out there in the freezing cold, and your hunger has become this deep, hollow ache that completely overrides any rational, baseline human fear.
Because at that point, you really aren't thinking about long-term safety, are you?
Exactly. You certainly aren't thinking about ancient rules or borders. You are just consumed by the absolute certainty that if you do not find something right now, you and your family are going to starve to death.
I mean, when a human being is pushed to that extreme edge of physical survival, the brain literally reprioritizes reality.
It has to, right?
Yeah, it has to. All those abstract concepts we cling to, caution, mythology, even the long-term consequences of our actions, they just evaporate.
They just go right out the window.
Completely. The hierarchy of needs just collapses down to a single point, which is the visceral reality of the cold and the empty stomach.
And that brutal, freezing moment is exactly where we are starting this deep dive today.
I'm really looking forward to this one.
Me too. So our mission today is to explore excerpts from this really profound character study. It's an analytical text called The Huntress of Prythian, Feyre Archeron's Transformation.
Which is such a fascinating source.
It really is. We are looking at the mechanics of how an ordinary person, driven purely by the kind of raw, ugly desperation we just described, ends up completely shattering the boundaries of ancient myths.
It's a really compelling analysis because, well, it refuses to treat the story as just a standard fantasy adventure.
Right. It goes way deeper.
It does. It examines it as a psychological evolution.
Yeah.
We are basically looking at the collision between mortal fragility and immortal power.
And what actually happens to the human mind when it's caught right in the middle of that impact.
Exactly.
So the analysis sets the stage with this incredibly striking opening quote, which is, hunger can turn a girl into something sharper than steel.
That is such a great line.
Right. It immediately strips away all the usual tropes we are used to in these stories.
Yeah, we aren't dealing with a chosen one born with some sort of magical destiny.
Or a secret royal bloodline or whatever.
No, not at all. We're dealing with sheer mortal desperation. It's just the simple, ugly need to survive until tomorrow morning.
Which is exactly what makes her eventual transformation so formidable.
Mm-hmm.
Because her starting point is defined by this profound vulnerability.
She is just a starving huntress in the dead of winter.
Right. And she spots a wolf. But the text makes this huge point to note that this is a wolf that, quote, should not have been a wolf.
Yeah, it has unnervingly knowing eyes and this unnatural stillness.
Now, if you've ever spent any time in the woods, you know that unnatural stillness is nature's loudest alarm bell.
Oh, for sure. It's terrifying.
It totally triggers the uncanny valley in the human brain.
Yeah.
Your instincts are just screaming at you that something is fundamentally wrong, and you need to back away immediately.
But she doesn't back away.
She doesn't. Because, like we said, fear cannot fill an empty stomach.
And you have to remember the context of the world she lives in. Humanity whispers about fairies as if they are natural disasters.
Like storms.
Exactly, like storms. They are beautiful from a safe distance, but deadly up close.
The old stories say crossing their border invites death. But killing one of them, that invites something far worse.
Yet she lets the arrow fly anyway.
Which is wild. So let's unpack the psychology of that moment because it's critical.
It really is the inciting incident for everything.
Right. She doesn't shoot because she's fearless or because she has this grand desire to slay a monster.
No, not at all. The analysis actually points out that she treats a creature of ancient myth as meat.
Wow. Yeah.
She reduces a magical, terrifying being to its caloric value purely because her physical reality demands it.
It makes me think of this desperate real-world gamble. It's like you are in a freezing home in the dead of winter. The power is completely out and you're literally going to freeze to death.
Right.
So you start ripping up your own floorboards and burning your family heirlooms in the fireplace.
That's a really good analogy.
You are actively destroying the structure of your own house, doing something inherently destructive, because doing nothing means certain death.
Yes.
But when the consequence arrives, when another beast comes crashing in demanding justice for the life she took, she doesn't run away. She faces it with that exact same grim resolve she used to face the cold.
Yeah, she doesn't flinch.
So I have to ask, does the text frame this as like an act of traditional bravery, or is she just shutting off her emotions and becoming this cold, calculated hero to face the beast?
Interestingly, the analysis argues against the idea of heroism entirely in this moment.
Really?
Yeah, it frames it as pure, brutal pragmatism, but that pragmatism is exactly the mechanism of her power.
How so?
Well, by acting purely on survival rather than being paralyzed by the awe or the terror that mortals are supposed to feel towards fairies.
Because mortals are supposed to either revere them or completely cower from them.
Exactly, mortals cower. She does neither. And by doing neither, she unknowingly shatters the fragile line between the mortal realm and the fairy realm.
That's fascinating.
The text actually argues that this specific lack of reverence, which is totally born from starvation, is the very arrow that shatters the wall between the worlds.
Okay, but to go back to my analogy, if you rip up all your floorboards to stay warm, eventually you don't have a house left to live in.
Right, you've destroyed your shelter.
And the consequence of her desperate pragmatism here is that she can no longer stay in those mortal woods.
No, she can't.
Facing the beast's justice drags her directly across that shattered line, straight into the heart of Prythian.
She's pulled right into the very danger humanity whispered about.
Which brings us to the second part of her journey, because stepping across that border forces a complete paradigm shift in how she has to survive.
It's a completely different game now.
She goes from battling the physical elements, the cold, the starvation, physical exhaustion, to navigating an entirely different kind of ecosystem.
And Prythian is described in the source as a place where beauty hides rot and kindness often wears a mask.
That line always gets me. The fairy courts aren't just like kingdoms on a map. There are these really complex reflections of power, desire, and fear.
They are deeply psychological landscapes.
And the source material notes that in the old human myths, mortals who step into the fairy realm usually lose their names or they lose their souls.
Which is the classic fairy tale warning.
Right. But Feyre loses something much quieter at first. She loses her certainty about who the monsters really are.
And that is arguably the most dangerous thing you can lose in a hostile environment.
Because humans rely so heavily on categorization to survive.
Exactly. We absolutely need to know what is safe and what is a threat. It's basic biology.
So here's where it gets really interesting to me. Usually in these old stories, the monster is obviously the monster. It has fangs, it lives in a cave, whatever.
Right, it's very clearly telegraphed.
But if she's in an environment where the threat detection system is inverted, where kindness wears a mask and beauty hides rot, how does an ordinary mortal even navigate that?
It's incredibly difficult.
It sounds less like a magical fairy tale and more like trying to survive a highly toxic, manipulative political landscape or a terrible workplace. So she basically has to become paranoid, right? Like she has to assume everything is a monster and completely shut down her capacity to trust.
Well, the text argues it's actually a lot more complex than just blind paranoia.
Okay.
It's an active and frankly agonizing dismantling of her entire worldview.
Dismantling it how?
Like you said with the toxic workplace analogy, if you've ever had to navigate a manipulative social environment, you know a version of this feeling. You have to learn to read the subtext of the room because your survival literally depends on it.
Right, you're constantly looking for the hidden agenda.
Exactly. If she goes into Prythian holding on to her mortal, human definitions of good and evil, she will be destroyed.
Because the beautiful Lord offering a gentle smile might be the true threat.
Yes. While a terrifying, scared creature might actually be her only ally.
So she has to completely unlearn her own human instincts.
She does. Losing her certainty is an agonizing process, but it's a necessary survival mechanism. Certainty, in a place that is built on centuries of illusions and immortal politics, is just a fatal weakness.
Because if you are absolutely certain a beautiful thing is good, you let your guard down.
And then you're dead. She has to exist in this constant state of cognitive dissonance, constantly evaluating every single interaction for hidden traps.
Man, that sounds absolutely exhausting.
It is incredibly taxing on the human mind.
And because Prythian is this psychological and magical minefield, surviving it forces her into these trials. And these trials test not just her physical endurance, but her very spirit.
They push her to her absolute limits.
The text mentions she faces impossible tasks, riddles that cost lives and bargains that are sealed with pain.
Which is such evocative language.
It notes that every choice she makes pulls her further and further away from the girl who once just hunted deer in the woods.
And the nature of these trials is very deliberate. The author notes they are pulled straight from the bones of old folklore.
Right, they feel very ancient.
They do. They are designed specifically to break mortal minds. Immortals use these types of trials to remind humans of their insignificance.
To put them in their place.
Exactly.
But the thing is, she doesn't break.
No, she doesn't.
The analysis pivots here and points out that she actually becomes something folklore fears. She becomes a mortal who refuses to stay small.
Yes, she starts learning what the text calls the language of power.
The language of power. Let's dig into that. Because she carves out a place by sheer will rather than by birthright.
And understanding that language of power is really the crux of her entire psychological evolution.
So what does that actually mean? Because it's not just her suddenly learning to throw fireballs or cast magic spells, right?
No, not at all. The language of power in the fairy courts is really about leverage.
Leverage.
Right. It's about learning to negotiate bargains where the specific phrasing is a matter of life and death.
Oh, like finding the loopholes.
Exactly. It's about withholding emotion when an immortal is actively trying to provoke you, or knowing how to tell a truth that functions as a lie.
So she's adopting their manipulative tactics.
She is.
But wait, what does this all mean for her core identity? If she is making these incredibly painful bargains and learning this manipulative language of power to survive among immortals, is the text saying she's essentially losing her humanity? Is she just stripping away her vulnerabilities to play their game?
You would naturally think so, but the text argues the exact opposite.
Really?
Yeah. She isn't losing her humanity, and she certainly isn't stripping away her vulnerability. She is weaponizing it.
Weaponizing her humanity. How does that work?
Well, in a realm entirely ruled by immortal power and ancient magic and inherent birthrights, her mortal desperation actually becomes her most unpredictable asset.
Okay, I need you to explain that. How does being fragile and mortal give her an edge against beings who can live forever?
It comes down to time. The mortals have an endless supply of time, which breeds complacency.
Oh, that makes sense. They've seen it all.
Right. Mortals do not have time. For a mortal, every single second is urgent. So when she makes a bargain that is sealed with pain, her capacity to endure that pain shocks them.
Because she's already used to suffering in a freezing cabin.
Exactly. The immortals expect her to play the role assigned to mortals in these myths. They expect her to be the victim to be pitied or just a plaything to be broken. They fully expect her to fold.
Because mortals always fold in the stories.
Always.
But because her motivation is rooted in that visceral, freezing desperation to protect the people she loves, she has a ferocity they simply don't possess.
She takes the very things that make her vulnerable. Her capacity for pain, her mortality, her desperate need to protect, and she forges them into leverage.
She takes what they think is her weakness and uses it against them.
Yes, she demands a seat at the table in a world that completely expected her to just be a footnote in their history.
That is so powerful. And by mastering this language of power and refusing to shrink away, she steps into a very ancient mythological role.
She does.
The analysis focuses heavily on her reshaping of this archetype. She evolves from the starving girl with a bow into the High Lady.
And the text compares her to the classic Huntress figure found in ancient mythologies. You know, the one who walks between worlds. Part human, part something else.
Right. And historically, those figures always meet deeply tragic ends.
Almost without exception.
They don't belong anywhere.
Yeah.
The humans fear them because they are touched by magic, and the gods or immortals destroy them because they are too human.
They are usually just cautionary tales for mortals.
Exactly. But it's like she broke the source code of the mythology itself.
She really did.
Instead of fading away as a tragic cautionary tale for other humans, she hacks the system to become the boss. She becomes the High Lady.
She doesn't just survive the game, she fundamentally changes the nature of the game itself.
She flips the chessboard completely over and rewrites the rules. And now she is in a position of ultimate authority, acting as a bridge between two worlds that were never meant to trust each other.
But, and this is a big but, the text is very careful to emphasize the cost of flipping that board.
Because there's always a cost.
Right. She carries the scars of both worlds, and she belongs to neither fully. Being a bridge is a monumental burden.
Yeah, bearing the scars of both worlds sounds like an incredibly heavy price for that power.
It is. A bridge exists to connect two land masses, but it is not entirely a part of either. It just bears the weight of everything crossing over it or walking on it.
The psychological weight of that duality must be crushing.
It has to be.
To be the bridge between the mortal realm and Prythian means she has to intimately understand the terror and the fragility of the humans she's protecting.
Right.
But at the exact same time, She has to wield the ruthless, terrifying power of the fairies to actually protect them.
Exactly. She can never again be just the simple girl hunting in the woods because she has seen way too much and compromised too much.
Her innocence was burned away in the trials.
Completely. But she can never be fully at peace among the immortals either because her soul was forged in mortal desperation. She holds the tension of both worlds within herself at all times.
By the time she comes out the other side of this transformation, she's functionally unrecognizable to the girl who first walked into the woods.
She is a completely different person.
And that brings this whole deep dive into a really stark focus for me. Her journey rejects the sanitized version of heroism. The one where the protagonist defeats the villain, stays perfectly morally pure, and gets a parade at the end.
Life and survival is rarely that clean.
It's not. This leaves us with a lingering, unsettling truth about what it really takes to survive when the entire system is rigged against you.
It forces the reader, and really anyone analyzing the text, to confront the reality of adaptation. To survive a predatory ecosystem, you have to integrate some of those predatory traits into yourself.
You really do. We've traced an incredibly dark, complex evolution today.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We did. We started with a starving girl whose visceral hunger overrode her innate terror long enough to shoot an unnatural wolf.
Right.
We followed her as the consequences of that desperate act dragged her across the border into Prythian. And there, she had to systematically dismantle her own threat detection system because kindness was a mask and beauty hid rot.
She had to learn a whole new way of seeing the world.
And then we examined how she endured those spirit-breaking trials, not by abandoning her humanity, but by weaponizing her mortal desperation and learning the leverage of the fairy courts.
Mastering that language of power.
Yes. And finally, we looked at how she flipped the chessboard on ancient mythology to rise as a scarred High Lady, a bridge between worlds bearing the heavy weight of both.
The sheer psychological endurance required for that arc is staggering when you step back and look at it.
It really is.
Yeah.
And the core takeaway from the source material hits incredibly hard. The terrifying truth of Feyre's journey isn't just about surviving ancient magic or completing trials.
No, it's deeper than that.
It is the realization that sometimes, to save yourself and to save the people you love, you must become the very thing the old stories warned you about.
Yeah.
As the text concludes, she becomes, quote, not a victim, not a legend, something new.
And that concept of becoming something new leaves us with a profound implication to consider as we wrap up.
Let's hear it.
Well, we've talked at length today about folklore and how humans whisper about fairies like they are deadly storms.
Right.
Feyre had to adapt to that world. She had to learn their ruthless language of power, leverage her pain and bargains, and eventually wield terrifying magic just to survive and protect her people.
She had to become like them.
Exactly. So the lingering question is this. If surviving and protecting others requires you to integrate the very traits of the monster that old mortal stories warned about, at what point does the world start writing entirely new warning stories about you?
Wow. Yeah, you step out into the freezing winter to save your family, you burn your own floorboards to survive the night, and you make it through. But when you finally step back out of the woods, you are the storm everyone is whispering about.
Exactly.
That is a lot to think about. Thank you so much for joining us in this deep dive into such a complex character study. For everyone listening, keep questioning the legends you hear, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.